Now we're going to go through the sharpening process on the grinder. Okay, now the first thing we have to do is mount the chain onto the grinder itself, and we do that on the chain vise, making certain that it's open. And then the next thing is to run the chain through at least one full rotation of the chain. And what we're looking for, if I have a bent link, that link will not allow the chain to roll over this end roller. If it is bent, we'll have to, the chain is no good and it needs to be discarded. Then the next step here is, once we've gone through, we also look to make certain that there's no damaged teeth or cutters, either the top plate or the cutting edge or the side plate. They can hit a nail, there can be something that causes extensive damage, and we'll have to reevaluate the chain to make certain that it's worth the effort to clean the chain up. Okay, I'm going to show you an example of a damaged cutter. You can see that this has either hit a nail or something sharp, and it's scraped the top plate, and our skew angle of the top plate has got a bevel to it now. It's not sharp, and we've lost the cutting corner itself. Usually what happens is you can go to the next link behind on the same side and you'll see that same damage. Usually, if this is not too much, if I come back to my most damaged piece, I will usually mark that with a marker, and we'll have to continue our sharpening process until we get past the damage. We can continue to do that all the way up to the end of life line, which is this little scribe here on the back of the chain, or at the top of the top plate. We can make the decision if the chain is too bad, then we just set it aside. Okay, once we have checked for no bent links and we don't have any severely damaged cutting surfaces, then we need to check that the pitch of the chain matches the pitch of our grinding wheel. And we do that by using this gauge. You can see this gauge has a .325, a quarter. Turning it over, I have a 3/8 and a .404. So what we're looking for is when the rivets line up between these holes. And we can see a .325 works. For example, if it's a quarter, well, it's not lining up. And that's the beauty of this kind of gauge. I can come in, I'm perfectly lined, so I know I have a .325 pitch, and I have a .325 pitch grinding wheel. Once we've determined that the chain is suitable for sharpening, we need to identify the shortest link and the longest link in the chain itself. That's easy to do with looking at the end of life line and the end of the cutter edge itself. And we're looking for the longest link here, because if we start sharpening the shortest link, what happens when we come to a long link is that we bite too much material out, and it causes burring and bluing of the chain link. So with that, these look the same. My next step is to make certain that my 30 degrees is set properly. See, if I go into this wrong and I cut the wrong side with the wrong skew angle, I've destroyed the chain. So I have to get the right side is what this is set up for right now. I check the 30 degrees. Now I need to check for the depth of cut and where we are with the chain advance. That requires setting the vise, seeing that I can spin. I like to take the depth go too far, I can't turn the wheel. I start tightening the depth until I feel it move. Right when it's free, that is exactly what I want. Again, I go low, and as soon as I feel it lift, I stop. Now, as far as the chain advance goes, that's controlled by right here. Again, I have to release, pull back on the chain, and you can see if I come into it and I'm too far away, there's no contact. If I go too, I can see here that if I go too far into it, it tries to lift the chain up. So this is a real fine adjustment. You need to make very, very small movements. You don't want to be doing movements like this. You need to be making movements like just a hair at a time. Again, release, go back just a teeniest bit, lock, lock, come in, and I like to spin just to see. Now, I've got the basic angle set. I want to take the chain off. What I like to do is mark my teeth when I first start with the Sharpie, so that number one, it defines my starting length, and when I use it to make certain that I've removed all of the metal, that there's no areas that have left. I'll see a blue streak, for example, across the top plate if I didn't get the depth of cut right, or if I didn't get it advanced right. So I'm looking for a very clean, all ink gone from my cutting surfaces. Now you can see that I have marked this link, or the cutter, up both on the cutting sides and the top. I place it in my machine. Again, I come in and I need to lift that up a little bit. The name of the game here is to try to remove as little of metal as possible. I'll start the grinder, and I'll come down and I'll just barely tip it. You see, I took several chops. I turn the machine off. I inspect the cutting. This cutter is cut properly. We barely removed any metal, and yet the ink has gone off of the bevel plate of the top plate and the bevel of the side plate. If these were not cut deep enough, or I needed to advance it, there would be ink left on the bevels, and I'm looking for that ink to be gone. Once I have that done, I know I have the settings correct on the saw and ready to move to the next tooth. I don't have to do this on all teeth. So that's why the magic marker, or the Sharpie, is such an important tool. Once that is set, I'm ready to quickly advance to the next, like this is the right side chain link or cutter. I go to the next right side chain cutter, and I do the same thing, except set the chain lock. Come down. I'm just lightly touching it. I don't want to hold it down because that'll cause it to burn, and that causes a burr. I like to generally inspect my first 3 or 4 chains, and that still looks good. So now then, once I've gone through the entire chain, I'm ready to move to the opposite side. And so moving from the right to the left, we change the skew angle to the 30 degrees. And now you see that we're coming in. You can we match the skew of the left side. The lengths of the chain appear to be the same. I also like to take these and I like to mark the inside of those again, just to make certain, because it's just so easy for there to be a slight difference between these two sides. We want to make them even. Oh, so that link is short, so I'm going to have to advance the chain just slightly. Boy, it doesn't take much. And inspect my cutting angles again. And I can see on this one that I still have some of the top plate that hasn't been cut. So what I will do there is just advance this the tiniest bit more. Lock it. You see there's not a whole lot of sparks come off of this like you would expect a grinder to do. I inspect that all the ink is gone. We've got a good cut. Now I'm ready to advance all the way through the chain. Now that's pretty much the process. All right, now after we've gone through sharpening all of the cutters and we're satisfied that everything is even, what we do is we've got to check the height of the rakers. Okay, and that again sets the height of the cutting angle, that how much wood essentially is fed into the cutter itself. If it's too low, it brings in too much wood, it makes the saw very aggressive and it usually will bog the saw down. But if it's high, it won't allow the saw to cut. And when it's not cutting, it's like we didn't sharpen the chain at all. So what we have is that we have a raker gauge, and we set that onto the top of the raker. The tooth sets on the inside of the gauge itself, and we set flat, and we use a flat file. Get my hands out of the way. And just go across the rakers a few times. We can usually feel if we're grinding on raker or not. If there's any question, we can take our marker, like go to the next one and mark it. Now I marked the top of mine with the marker again. I have the depth gauge, which sets the proper depth for the raker. I place it over the top of the tooth and the next tooth, so it rides right on top. And now by holding down, and I'll set the chain a little bit, I just draw a flat file straight across the top. We can see now that that raker was high, and by filing, I've shortened it so that the tooth will get the proper bite on the wood when it's cutting. And I can see from my mark that I have removed metal. So I'll proceed with this all the way around the chain until I'm no longer removing any of the raker metal. And so once that's done, we have a sharp chain. This is the basics of the chain sharpening process. Now I do want to say that it's on occasion, we know that we have sharpened the rakers, or sharpened the cutters, and we've properly dressed the rakers, and it goes out to the field and the guys put it on and say, hey, this chain's not cutting correctly. Well, there can be some other factors that go in there, and that could be, one is a new inexperienced man on a chainsaw has quite a tendency to bind the bar up and not allow the bar to actually cut, and holds the cutters off of the wood. Another problem is with bars, after they can get worn and get a burr on the bottom of the bar. That's the reason that we normally alternate the bar from top to bottom every time we change the chain, but still it occurs. And when a burr is on the bar, that burr can grab the wood grain and hold the chain from cutting. And that's mainly the problems that come on, but most people, that when we finish a chain from this group, are very happy with these chains. And that completes the process that we use for sharpening cutters on a chainsaw. Thank you.